of services and products. So now, if I'm in Puerto Rico and I have a legal client in Colorado, let's say, whatever services I do for that client in Colorado, assuming that I have a license in Colorado to operate, right? Whatever money is made comes back to Puerto Rico, and I pay very small taxes, 4% taxes. So again, the idea is to bring in capital in order to export services and move then the economy that way. But the one that actually is the one that most crypto currency persons that have moved to Puerto Rico benefit from is from a different law called Act 22. And basically, it provides in general for a period of 15 years, which is renewable. If the person moves down here, if the person qualifies, right? Once they get this particular tax decree, they pay zero interest in capital gains, short-term or long-term, zero federal taxes, because in Puerto Rico you don't pay federal taxes, and then 0% taxes on your income. So again,
holy smokes.
So you look at what you have any state, right? And then you do this. It's obvious that this is very attractive. No matter what you do, I'm attracted to it and I live here. So I obviously would have loved to leave and come back. But certainly there are some qualifications for you to actually apply for this particular benefit. So once that came out, it was starting to pick up steam and a lot of entrepreneurs moved down here. And then amongst those were some people from the cryptocurrency sphere. I don't know, how would you
I'd say the crypto sphere, the crypto community.
Crypto sphere,
yeah, whatever. But so apparently, well, not apparently, I made a little mistake here. I got everything set up and I didn't hit the go live button. So if you guys are just getting on here now, I'm going to take it back. I think everybody heard your explanation of kind of why it's a tax haven and how that came about. But prior to that, we weren't live. So I'm going to reintroduce you just for everybody that's maybe tuning in now. So yeah, thanks for being here, y'all. This is the Opei live stream, and we are sitting down tonight with Diego Alcala from Puerto Rico. He's an attorney down there. He's doing some cool stuff. You can check him out on Twitter. I think Leon dropped that in the chat, and we're super excited to be talking with him. And he's just sharing kind of about what he was just sharing was what the incentives are for someone to move to Puerto Rico, especially if they've made a bunch of gains in the cryptocurrency sphere. Because we saw a wave of people after this last bull run, move down there, excuse me, to protect their gains and to get away from some of those capital gains taxes they owe the federal government. So that's right where we're at. I think does that track, Chill?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay. So this is going all the way back to the 1900s. You're saying that the government is strapped for cash. So they've got this syndicate that's basically controlling the government coffers, and they're making all of these incentives to try and bring business, create jobs, and stimulate the economy down there, of which some of the crypto community was part of. Let's just get right into it. What does the average Puerto Rican citizen kind of think about, or what's kind of the view of these people moving there for the tax haven breaks, and how is their perception by the locals?
Yeah, so that's a complicated question, and I'm going to say that if you get 13 Puerto Ricans to talk about this subject, you'll probably get 22 opinions out of it. So just to be fair, let's go back a little bit in time just to put it in perspective. Puerto Rico used to benefit economically from a tax section in the IRS code, which provided a particular tax haven quality to pharmaceuticals and other manufacturing jobs in Puerto Rico. That particular provision had a sunset of 2008. We've had that since the 70s. And from the 70s to the early 2000s, our economy allowed many people to climb up the economic ladder. A lot of pharmaceutical companies were built, a lot of employment, right? And that directly and indirectly, and a lot of professionals went into this type of business. So it is one way in order to stimulate the economy. What happened was that when in 1996, through some lobbying efforts, the IRS and the government in charge under President Clinton decided that this would die in 2004, I think, more or less. So what happened is that those companies that had come to Puerto Rico to enjoy these tax benefits decided to leave, right? That's around NAFTA. So a lot of people, those corporations ended up going to Mexico and other cheaper labor markets. So, I mean, that's what happened. And when you have that, and it happens so quickly, right, in 10 years, the economy actually bottomed out. So we went into a recession starting in 2004, 2005. And then on top of that, you added the economic crisis that the United States went through in 2008, 2009 with the housing market dropping. So that came on top of our little recession that we had, borderline depression. So back in those times, we had roughly 18% unemployment rate when you compare it to the States, to 6 or 7% at max. And our average income is half of what Mississippi's average income is, which is the poorest state of the union when you compare to what average person makes. I think our average income is roughly $18,000 to $19,000 a year, compared to 36 or 40 for someone in Mississippi. And again, these are approximates. I'm not an economist.
Sure.
But these are pretty comparable statistics that happen. We also have what's called municipal bonds. Municipal bonds in Puerto Rico were a way for the government in order to receive money for building projects. They use that initially for projects and infrastructure, but then they started using these bonds for balancing the budget and making sure that they could pay the employees in the government. So they would then getting debt. It's like getting a credit card to pay off another credit card, and then a second and a third and a fourth credit card to keep paying off those credit cards. So we did that.
I don't know anything about that.
No, not us. Of course, no one does that. But we did. Our government did that. So what happened is that we get these one on top of the other, and the municipal loans, that bond market that we had, enjoyed something that no one else had. That's triple taxation, free from triple taxation. So you don't pay federal taxes on those bonds, you don't pay state taxes on those bonds, and municipal bond taxes. So it's the only instrument out there that had that guarantee. And on top of that, our Constitution guaranteed payment on those bonds before any other obligation that the government had. So before paying pensions, we had to pay those bonds. Before we pay off services such like emergency rooms, hospitals, schools, anything. Before that, we needed to pay off that. So then in 2012, 2013, our governor then said, we can't pay this debt, so we need to go bankrupt. And that created a huge uproar in the financial markets and in the municipal bond markets, because you had all these investors in these markets. Some of them were what we call I don't know if it's called scavenger investor hedge funds that just go in when there's a distressed market.
Yep.
So they buy off all this debt and then wait out for the negotiation process to go through. The issue here is that Puerto Rico, because of the colonial status that we have, does not have access to the same tools that would allow us to restructure the debt as if we were a state in bankruptcy court, as if we were or a sovereign nation with the instruments of the world, IMF instruments. So those are not available to us. So what we got is Congress enacting a law that basically deposited the entire economic future of Puerto Rico with what we call a fiscal control board, which basically is individuals that tell our government how to spend the money that we have. So they are the ones taking the shots and saying, you're going to close 30 schools, and then you're going to give money to X, Y, and Z service. So just to give you a big picture of what's going on the macro, while at the same time, in order to attract investment to Puerto Rico, the government in 2012 enacted these Law 20, Act 20, and Act 22 in order to stimulate startup companies to come to Puerto Rico in order to export. They stimulated for the purposes of bringing entrepreneurs that would then create more jobs in Puerto Rico. So again, this is a measure to counter the lack of access to capital in the United States, in the international market. So we have a big loss of revenue because of our financial storm. I would add something before the word storm. But in order for the government to somehow offset what's going on, they brought in these measures and created a tax haven, basically.
So sorry to cut you off. I want to try and make sure I'm understanding this correctly. So let me know if I'm out here in left field. But it sounds like because of the status that you guys aren't a state, but you're also not, an independent sovereign nation, which I think that's among some people there, that's a popular kind of view. Like, why are we part of the U.S.? Like, we're really not getting a whole lot out of this. We don't have the benefits of statehood, and our economy's pretty much just kind of being picked over by the hedge fund vultures, and so you're kind of stuck in this like state of limbo. I don't know if that's the right term, but you're not quite
that's a very
this
decent
way,
term,
and
yeah.
not quite there, and so it's created this environment where you've just got individuals deciding what the monetary policy is, and it sounds like it's not going that great in terms of benefiting the actual people that it's the government is supposed to serve.
That's actually a great explanation.
Nice.
And then I was just going to jump in and say 2017 came along. From 2012 to 2017, I would say that a lot of people benefited from these incentives, and a lot of people came down to Puerto Rico. Even at the early 2016, with this administration that we have right now, they sold Puerto Rico to many people outside for them to be brought into Puerto Rico as a blanket. This is a blank slate. We want to provide you with whatever help you need. So again, this is the economic policy of Puerto Rico. We are going to give you whatever you need to do whatever you want. It's not one of the most structured or sound policies, but basically that's what they wanted. So, and I just want to add something. That's a very neoliberal position, right? We're going to reduce the government holdings and properties in order to have private sector come in and then run that. Whatever, if it works or if it doesn't, that was part of the entire push here in order to get these alliances with private companies in order to run some services, if they were still available. Because remember, we're suffering from a lot of cutbacks due to this fiscal financial control board. So then I say 2017 because that was a significant occurrence, specifically with Hurricane Irma and Hurricane Maria. These are devastating events that certainly created more of an uncertainty financially for the entire government. And then obviously it trickled all the way down to everyone. We're talking about an event that for many people, not only did the government did not take as serious as everyone thought they should, but I think people were surprised to see for the first time the amount of incompetence that had been accumulating in many other industries that the government had been taking care of. So for example, I personally was without electricity for 72 days.
72, so almost 3 months.
Correct. And I was one of the lucky ones because I live in San Juan, and I'm like 7 blocks away from the tourist area. So obviously they wanted to build that as fast as possible, rebuild that. So there are people out there that were without electricity for roughly 10 months. So just to give you a perspective of what that means. That means that when you wake up, you are going to go to your camping utilities and you cook breakfast for people. And then once that's done, you jump in a shower, right? Or your kids jump in a shower and it's freezing cold and you warm it up with whatever you can find. And then you cook whatever you have and you make sure that your neighbors are okay. I live in a building. We have an apartment building. We have a bunch of elderly people here. So I want to make sure they were fine. And then when we went out, we couldn't go out because we needed gasoline. So obviously gasoline was the big issue because of the storm, gasoline was at a premium. So in order to get gasoline, you needed 2, 3, 4, 5-hour lines. So again, I mean, this is like normal things that happen. So you need to understand, no internet, no phones for the first, I want to say, week and a half. So there was this desperation of understanding who's where, what's going on. So obviously this chaos then goes and gets reflected in what the government's capacity is to then engage in a redistribution of whatever funds we have. So now, obviously, the essential services are needed the most in social services, just getting people back connected to anything, right? So that's a very significant moment because it shifted the priorities in the minds of the people, right? What are the priorities for the control board at this moment? What should be the priorities for the government at this moment in time? So we keep moving forward, and remember, when the initial numbers started coming in, when President Trump came to Puerto Rico,
throwing paper towels at everybody.
Correct. But the biggest headline then was that the official death toll was 6 people. The official death toll was never actually fixed by the government, but the estimates, some estimates have them at 4,500 and something persons passing away.
More than 6, yeah.
Correct. And then from the low end would be 1,500, the high end 4,500 people.
Yeah. That's more people that died in September 11th, just to put that in a little bit of context.
Correct. And we're not saying that they happened to die because that day they died because of the storm. What happened was, this is an aggregate number because of the amount of destruction to the infrastructure that happened in Puerto Rico. We lost electricity, we lost access to hospitals. A lot of people that were diabetic, that needed dialysis, couldn't get a dialysis machine because the dialysis center did not have electricity and couldn't get gas in order to run the backup generator.
Jeez.
So you have this continuation of a disaster, right? And at the end, statisticians that work, Puerto Ricans that were in the States, build these models in order to just see what was going on, and these numbers started coming out. And that's remember, you have that institutional memory. We also have the situation, as you mentioned, President Trump throwing paper towels, while at the same time the local government was meeting in San Juan, although they couldn't reach by phone or anyone outside of the metropolitan areas. There were like some major mayors that couldn't get reached for like 6 days after the storm, so no one had any contact with them. But the government decided to create this center hub in San Juan. Everyone had air conditioner, and everyone looked great in that center, convention center, where the operations were taking place. So that's when a lot of people were donating stuff from the States. A lot of people were donating stuff, and they were being taken to these particular spots to be distributed by the government. But then obviously it became too clear that the government didn't have a plan on how to do that. They didn't know how to distribute stuff. They didn't know, because they for whatever reason, they just couldn't take care of that. So again, why is this important? Because it's important to understand what the needs of the people are around this time, and then what the priorities are for the government. So again, you come up with that. 2018 comes around, and by 2018, we start hearing about more numbers coming out, the amount of things that the government did wrong. So there's a huge pushback against the government. Whenever they're trying to impose something, there's a lot of civil disobedience. There's a tradition in Puerto Rico of protesting, and we take that very seriously. We will protest everything that we can, and we will go out and demand that you respect our right to do that. So every May 1st, we have continually gone out to do that. And 2018 protests on May 1st 17 and 18 became very confrontational with the police. So now we have these scenes similar to what you're experiencing in the United States, clashes between police officers and protesters, because of the lack of attention to the government, and because the government was passing very unique laws in Puerto Rico that would strip away rights for the workers, for the efficiency, or making Puerto Rico more attractive for private investment.
So even though I mean that's a disaster, you're dealing with literally a natural disaster. You still have the government kind of pushing forward this like investor mentality or investor friendly mentality, and is it? I mean, my initial thought is, that's kind of at the expense of the people. Is that what it ended up being?
Yes. And that's exactly, there's a book by Naomi Klein, who's a writer. She calls it what's called the Chalk Doctrine. Basically, once you experience a situation of total chaos, like a hurricane situation in Puerto Rico, you have the government using that opportunity to pass a bunch of reforms, to either the labor reforms and other types of reforms, to strip away certain rights that the people have gained. And it's not just one thing, it's that they pass many things at the same time. So that overwhelming feeling of, oh my God, they're doing this all at the same time, it's called what they call the Chalk Doctrine. So we had that. We had that in Puerto Rico. And at the same time, we were struggling to get electricity. We were struggling to get back on our feet. So one of the avenues that we had is just to people leave Puerto Rico. We are American citizens since 1917. So one way to control this disappointment is that we can leave and come back if we want, meaning that we can get on a plane and need a visa. So that's a huge pressure, and it has used throughout. It has people outside of Puerto Rico whenever economic conditions in Puerto Rico are not optimal. So we had in the 30s, we had, and that's how the first migration to. We have a population of Puerto Ricans. Why? Because at one point Hawaii was the economics of Puerto Rico.
Sorry, it's getting a little choppy there. Oh shoot, did we lose him?
Looks
I'm
like
here.
we might. Oh, there he goes.
Okay, all right, he's back. Okay.
Sorry about that. They're no. So just
It's a little bit choppy.
It might. Let's see here. I think he's still on the call.
Yes, I'm here.
You might. Let's just give it a sec. Sometimes it'll come back.
Yeah, or maybe cut off the video just to let it kind of like catch up a bit or something. And I think Chill has a question.
I have two actually.
Oh.
So my first question would be, so how is someone who obviously like Bitcoiners who move from the mainland US treated differently by the Puerto Rican government versus someone who's local and lives there? And my second question would be, what are there any actionable steps or any influence that these Bitcoin communities have that they could use, to kind of shift the infrastructure and just influence the Puerto Rican government to come up with, build better infrastructure, I suppose?
No, I think that's a great question. I think when this whole thing was going on, before Maria and Irma came, there was a push by the government to integrate the cryptocurrency community and other blockchain-based communities and make it part of the economic opportunity package for Puerto Rico. So at one point, there was a discussion of creating a central bank from Puerto Rico that would assist all different coins out there. So there is an effort from our government to recognize the importance of this economy and to integrate it integrate that economy into Puerto Rico's economy. Not necessarily, and this is the thing, not necessarily incorporating locals, but it was mostly to use cryptocurrency outside, right? To promote it as a hub. And I think that's one of the drawbacks of what Puerto Rico government failed to do. I don't think the government invested at all in order to explain to the local community that integration or why the Bitcoin or crypto community, not because they brought money, but how were they going to be integrated into our culture or into our system and not replace us, right? And that's one thing I think that one of the many things that the government didn't do correctly when it came to this. If you look at these meetings between the government and the Bitcoiners, it was really expensive to even attend one of these meetings. Sometimes it was $500, $2,000 a meeting or a convention. And you're like, you're not really including the normal people. You're doing this to maintain this exclusivity. And therefore, there was this missed opportunity, I think, integrating the community into Puerto Rico. Now, when you get these type of incentives, you need to do certain things. And one of those things was to get residents in Puerto Rico. When you get a lot of people with money at one point, at one time, down here at the same time, combined with a depression, a recession that's been going on since 2006, you're going to get cheap a lot of stuff. And that means a lot of people were buying up properties left and right, for good or bad. But some of the properties that were being purchased were in the historic center of Old San Juan. I see that Leon has a picture. You go all the way to the top part, that's Old San Juan. A lot of those were locals. Now we don't have a lot of locals, people living in those communities. So a lot of them have been converted to Airbnbs. So you have communities being displaced by this type of investment, which is normal, but at the same time, it's accelerated because our government has been forcing certain requirements on people that come in for those incentives. When you ask, how do you integrate something like this? I think that it also has to do with the community. How do they want to join in, right? You can't really force goodwill on anyone, but you can certainly integrate them in different projects in order to improve. Because you know what?
That's a great quote.
Yeah, they need to live here. I mean, if they're benefiting from that particular tax decree, you need to be here for 15 years. Now you need to be here 6 months out of the year, 183 days in order to qualify. But I think that one of the things, unfortunately, I think that's happening. It's that those who have been benefiting from those incentives have been selecting certain communities where they live at, and they have created bubbles inside of Puerto Rico that benefit those recipients of those incentives. And I think it's a wasted opportunity for both people getting those incentives, but at the same time for the community not to integrate itself with this type of technology, which I think deep down when you come to blockchain, I think there's so much potential outside just of crypto. Is just one example. I can think of many other examples. Now I can't say how many successful examples have been out there, but I can certainly see the potential when you look at microgrids on solar energy, when you have other uses where you can decentralize ownership schemes. You can certainly see how that can be integrated into other sectors, and by maintaining those particular opportunities to a select few, there's missed opportunity, and I think that's what we talked about last time. How that creates this sort of resentment, because it creates this division of the who has and who doesn't have, right?
Yep.
On top of that, it happened during the worst possible times in Puerto Rico. You already had a recession, which was aggravated by hurricanes, which was then aggravated by tremors and earthquakes that we had in 2020. And then on top of that, we have COVID at this moment. I don't want to know about anyone right now. So it's a melting pot. I want to go back to 2019. We had 19 days in which every day we went out and we protested, and we got the governor to resign without firing a bullet. There was no revolution, a bloody revolution, but the community was so upset as to how Puerto Rico has dealt with this situation that by pure pressure from the community and organization wise, we were able to have an elected governor quit. And that hasn't happened in a long time, many other places, without the military joining and kicking someone out. So I think that that's just an example as to how much the environment is.
I have a couple of questions. So one, has the local government thought of any ideas to use crypto in a way to benefit, the nation, the island, be it either like some kind of government Puerto Rico token, or like using DeFi for local services in some way? And in your opinion, what do you think would be the best way for crypto to kind of help out Puerto Ricans?
Let me go back. I think that crypto and government don't mix. Let's put it that way. I think that the decentralization point is not to be part of a particular government. And I look at what Venezuela tried with the Petro coin, in which they themselves were sponsoring a particular alternative to their economic coin, which is basically the opposite of what the crypto community wants. It's a decentralization that would allow the people from Venezuela, right, who were suffering from inflation, to have their own particular coin that would be stabler than their national coin, and it would provide them with some sort of liquid assets so they can reach certain markets. It's very difficult for me to incorporate that model with a government model, and I haven't seen, and this is me, I am not 24/7 on this particular community, but I haven't seen that integration work other than permitting, right, the regulation for this coin or economic system to work. So we don't have a lot of control as to what happens in Puerto Rico, because we, again, our under the federal system of the United States. And so the SEC is who will determine if it works in Colorado, if it works in Puerto Rico, if it works in New York or Virgin Islands. So when it comes to the structure, we'll unfortunately can't really do as much as we want. Now there was a thinking, as I mentioned earlier, of creating a central bank or something to that extent that would allow different coins to appear somehow in Puerto Rico, but that wasn't really fleshed out other than just discussions. And there may be a white paper out there on that in Puerto Rico, but I certainly I never seen it. Your second question or your second point is, what can people who are in this space do in Puerto Rico? And I think that it's going to come down to, are you willing to teach others how to fish, or are you going to give them a fish? And I think that's the point. Are you going to come down and live off your profits? And, you can create an economy by getting on a plane and flying from one island to the other. The pilot will make money. But are you more interested in having other people learn technology or learn new skills that would provide, instead of one member of a community, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 members? And then that way you create a network. So that's the challenge, right? How can you come up with projects that will not only provide economy on a one-to-one scale, but what you want to build is a community in which everyone in the community can improve. And that's the hard part, because when you think about it, it's gonna go, it's a more difficult route. It's easier if I just give someone else $1,500 a year or $2,000 for charity, and I move on to do my own thing.
Yeah. Did you have a question, Chill?
Yeah, I mean, me and Diego agree on, many of these issues come from, corruption and just having the government making those decisions that benefit certain groups and disadvantage others. But what I'm seeing, and especially in the areas, not just Puerto Rico, but in Latin America, and I believe this in my heart, that, the uncensorable future of Bitcoin and the fact that it cannot just be printed out of thin air would ultimately benefit, and especially people who are at, in places like Puerto Rico. So what I would like to know is, for example, what I've seen, microloans were one of the projects that I've seen in Latin America that people could benefit of, because, sometimes they don't have the credit score, or they don't have the necessary documents to get a big loan, but they may have, good ideas. And you mentioned the conferences being super costly and unaffordable. And I wanted to see if there's any way that the locals could get educated, could get access to this technology.
Yeah. Absolutely. And let me back up and just correct something. When I mentioned those conferences, I was more talking about how the government promotes it, right? There is a Bitcoin community, crypto community in Puerto Rico. They're very active, and they have when we used to go out, you can go on Monday nights and hang out at a bar in Old San Juan and learn about it and interact with people in that community. So when I mentioned that earlier, those were government-led efforts, but the crypto community in Puerto Rico is active. And I unfortunately have not interacted with many of them, but I'm sure that they have interacted with other local communities to promote the use of crypto. You mentioned a very good example as to microloans and the importance of that. And as you mentioned, there are other organizations in Puerto Rico doing something similar, but the need is so big, you can't really go bad, right, in doing that type of investment. One of the differences that I can just mention between Puerto Rico and other places in America would be that we use the dollar. So our dollar structure is it won't cost that inflation and devaluation as other economies have experienced during depressions and recessions. if it hits us, it's going to hit us, but it's going to also hit the states. So somehow we're going to have some that's going to come from the United States. So that's one thing that differentiates us. Another thing is that Bitcoin still needs electricity and internet and all that fun stuff. So whenever we have blackouts, we may lose that ability to use that currency to get access, quick access. So, for example, during Hurricane Maria, it would have been non-existent. Nothing would have worked. As a matter of fact, I could have lost my computer because of the power outages and different voltages would have burned the computer. I could have risked my entire Bitcoin account because of that.
So there is. I want to make a comment, and I got a couple more questions. So there is a Bitcoin satellite. And now I know, like satellite phones and stuff like that, that's not easy access for most people. But perhaps there could be some way to make that cheap in the future for more people, so to avoid that. And yeah, as far as with Bitcoin, has the government? Do you think people in the government are thinking about storing Bitcoin, or even at the even smaller local governments? Because
no, you need Bitcoin. I think that you guys are more aware of what we need in order to mine Bitcoin. We need internet access that's reliable, as fast, and we need energy. It's things that are not really happening in that.
Yeah. I meant more like holding it in a cold storage wallet, even a paper wallet, as kind of like a holdings. Yeah.
We don't. I mean, this is me. This is not. I'm not a government employee. I don't dictate the economy in Puerto Rico. But remember, we have a very, very serious situation when it comes to deficits at this moment. People are differentiating: will they open or shut down an entire school district? We're talking about 300 schools being shut down and from one year to the next. So the idea of investing in something like that even may be attractive, but I don't think we have the long-term view necessary in order to hold on to that for 15 years to hope that it can return the investment while there are other portions of the economy that are disintegrating. Basically, there's so much need, and I'm not saying that what we're doing now is enough. I'm saying because remember, we still have a fiscal control board that dictates what goes where, and our pension funds are being cut, and so there is a bigger, more immediate, right, need. Not to say that that's not an idea. I mean, that's a great idea if you have disciplined investment, which we haven't really done that well.
Yeah, good.
Go ahead, Leon. Okay.
Oh.
I was just gonna say it from our conversation we had a little earlier. It seems that the public perception of the people that kind of are aware of the crypto, the crypto dudes, I think is what you referred to them as.
Yeah.
And the local Bitcoin community. There's some stronger feelings about that, and you mentioned purchasing all the property, and I think you made an analogy, or not an analogy. I mean, you just stated like there's people under the blue FEMA tents with no electricity and no power, and then there's people driving around Old San Juan in a chauffeured car with high-speed internet and electricity, and they're kind of being viewed, not super favorably. So it's tough. I think there are definitely solutions if the community was receptive to it. There are solutions that could potentially help with the economic situation, but the current environment, from what you've shared, seems to be it's not going to be very well received. It's a bit of an uphill battle at
I think
this
that
point.
One of the things I wanted to you're referring to a conversation we had a week ago, and you're correct. I think that I mentioned last time there was a bad taste, right, in everyone's mouth when we mentioned crypto in Puerto Rico, and I'm not saying because of anything in particular. It's just because of timing, right? At the same time, the benefits are so good that it just disproportionately hits the economy and the people around us differently. Another thing was that when the crypto boys came down, a lot of things were promised, meaning that, I mean, there was an integration, there was an intent, at least by mouth, to do a lot of stuff. But what that ended up happening was just to give $1,500 to some organization, and there was a lot of lip service, but not a lot of work done. I'm not saying that that's all that happened. There's certainly a lot of stuff, but by the amount of hype that was coming in from specific people in that community, I can say that it was disappointing. If I was optimistic about that, but most of the island didn't know who these guys were. They have no clue what crypto is. Most people don't know and don't understand how that works. So, and at the same time, we had other stuff to do. We have to figure out how not to cut everything cut down because of the junta, and we then had to deal with Maria. So when all this attention was going to the future of Bitcoin, no one really cared. What we were saying is, why are you having these things for $2,000 a plate when most people can't eat? It just bad timing, but at the same time, there's some personalities that came in that were a little bit over the top and not really controlling the moment.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, this is my personal opinion on it. So it seemed like there's a bit of like that white knight syndrome where,
right,
you know, hey, we have this money, we've got all these big ideas, and that's something that's incredibly prevalent in the crypto space. And it's actually, you know, in the right context, it's something that attracts me to the space. Like, hey, we're going to change the world for the better. We got people with big ideas who are well funded, and we're going to go out and we're going to make the future that we all want and we all deserve. Putting that into practice, though, and I think that's like the real important thing, and what I want to make sure and drive home to everybody that's watching is just, you can have the best intentions in the world, you can have the funding, you can have the ideas, and sell people on that idea and get everyone excited. I know I heard about, you know, the Puerto Rican kind of Bitcoin experiment or whatever you want to call it. It's like, oh my gosh, that's so awesome. And then, you know, we didn't hear a whole lot about it. And then to talk with you, you know, a year or two later and hear the actual implementation of it and how it's been received, it's disappointing. You know, I would have hoped that the crypto community would have done better. But at the same time, it's a great lesson, and especially with the markets, you know, maybe looking like they're going to start trending upwards again. We might have another kind of repeated 2017 in the crypto space, where there's a lot of new crypto millionaires and maybe even billionaires. And so I see this cycle repeating itself, and I want to make sure, you know, that it's, you know, we learn something from this. We don't just go and repeat it again, because it's not, it's just not that easy. Like exactly. I love what you said. You can't force goodwill on people. That's, you know, if you don't take anything else away from tonight, then you can't force goodwill on people. And yeah, so anyway.
And it's also a different perception of what sometimes we want a place to be as to what reality is. So you do have this perception being sold by the government, open arms, everything's great, we speak English, you have your own like whatever, and we got malls and there's Burger King and stuff. So, I mean, and then you come down here, we do all have that, but we also have a lot of stuff going on.
You have a very unique history, and I think people don't, you know, and it's something that I learned quite a bit from you about, just from, you know, our brief conversations. But I mean, just the colonial status and kind of the history of mainland, maybe overextending their influence and sort of forcing it upon the island. And I mean, I'm sure we could do another 2 hours, kind of breaking that down.
I need another drink for that one, but absolutely no. I think, and it's important what you're saying, because some of the times when we go to someone else's backyard, we don't understand the context in which they live in, and my best intentions are going to be useless until I integrate them into that plan. And if they say no, it's not going to work. So sometimes what happens is that we impose our plans on others regardless, because we have the money to do it or we have the resources to do it, and then we get out. without thinking about what those consequences are. And that doesn't mean because the currency community is doing that. When Maria hit, we had all these universities from the United States thinking that they could do better than what we did. Well, what they did is hire locals to do their investigation, and it came out from other universities in the United States. That's like hijacking education research there. And it is the phenomenon that happens in other spaces, and we're not alone, right? Hey, when we want to look at the United States, that's called cultural appropriation when you take hip hop and you put a white rapper on. So I'm not dissing on Enement or anything like that. I'm just saying that the chances of a white rapper being famous is going to be higher than the 100th best black artist. And that happens everywhere, right? And I'm sorry, I brought in race and I brought in all these subjects, but that's life. You understand? That's life. It's not black or white. It's gray, and sometimes it's dirty, and sometimes it's clean, and sometimes it's nice, and sometimes it isn't, and sometimes it's in a different language, and sometimes it kicks you in the ass, and you don't even know what happened.
It's a beautiful mess.
Of course, the chaos is what it is. If it was that easy, we would be in a 1984 George Orwell's film. So I say all this because it's important that even though you do have money, you understand that you want certain things to be better in your life. Well, sometimes it doesn't work in a vacuum. You may live in a vacuum. Hey, there's spaces in Puerto Rico that are Law 20 and 22 recipients, and they are in their own communities, and there's a very limited interaction with the actual community other than, normal services. But there are other people that have benefited, but they have given back to the community. It doesn't matter if you're crypto or not. If you are a nice person, you're going to be a nice person, poor or rich, local. I mean, there are plenty of locals that I don't want to hang out with. So it's not a situation that is exclusive. It's not xenophobia. It's just a matter of what is your legacy? Is your legacy going to be accumulating wealth online, or is it going to be given back to the community that you choose to be part of? I think that's the point. Where are you in your life? What's your legacy? What do you want to do in your life? And whatever you decide to do, that's great. But don't expect accolades from the people around you when you choose certain things. And I think that's the problem that happened here. A lot of people are expecting some sort of celebration.
Yeah, well, that's kind of how it sounds like it's a little bit how the government sold it too.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm not absolving our government. We kicked it out. We still, in the last term, last year of this particular administration.
Right.
But I'm bringing that up because it's a collective effort. And we, as Puerto Ricans, we also have to take control of what we want, right? Do we want this island to become a tax haven for a select few people? Or do we want to integrate ourselves into the international community and bring other industries in and do what we need to do, right? I'm not gonna sit here and say, yes, it's all the government's fault and it's all the crypto fault. No, that's not the point. My point is everyone has a responsibility, including us. And that's part. I think we did something last year that's good. I hope that we can move forward from that and learn and keep growing without the need to disregard this entire experience, because I do think that there is an opportunity in order, as Sis was saying earlier, as to different programs that can be implemented through different technologies. And as I mentioned from the beginning, if we build crypto here, I mean, not build, but just educate others and teach them, I think there's a good market out there for people. And we have a very educated population too. I would say this is one of the highest college graduated citizenship in Puerto Rico compared to the United States. So a lot of people that leave are actually engineers and lawyers. And so, I mean, it's a really high educated populace. So
what made you to, because I think you said you went to college here in the States, right?
Yes, I did.
What made you return home? If you don't mind
I went to Babson College up in Wellesley, Massachusetts. It's a business school. It's a business school up there. So I did business, and then I did event management for a few years, and I came back to Puerto Rico for law school. After law school, I worked in Puerto Rico, and then I went back to Washington, D.C., and I earned LLM, which is a master's in law. in international law and human rights, which if there's something that pays less money than public defense work, it's actually human rights. So I did that, and my wife is actually a human rights professor, so we are both poor as hell. So I did that.
Fight.
Yeah, so we went back to Puerto Rico. I had an opportunity to jump into the federal public defender's office in Puerto Rico, and I took it, and we've been here ever since. But we know that we can have a better quality of life maybe if we go back to the States. We don't have our family there, so it's nice to know that my kids know their grandparents, and we're 10 minutes away from a beach walking. And if I wanted to hang out with a crypto boy, I can find one somewhere around here. So
I'm sure they're there.
No, they're there. And Puerto Rico, I mean, aside from everything that I've painted, I think it has a unique history. It has a very interesting set of problems, but it's a great place. I love being down here. That's not to say that I want to move. I'm just saying that it's a great place to be at.
Yeah, I've never been, and it's really interesting to hear your thoughts on it. I have a great buddy I play a lot of hockey with who's got some family down there, and he goes back and visits.
Cool.
And talks very highly of it. So one of these days I'll get down there. I'll have
Good.
to look
Anytime.
you up. We'll go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go see what old San Juan has to trouble to get into.
you got Bitcoin, so you can buy me the entrance there.
There we go. It's on me. It's on me. Well, yeah. Let's see. We're kind of getting about an hour in. I think we covered most of what we wanted to cover. Is there anything else we talked about that I'm blanking on here?
No, I think that what I wanted to share with you is what you guys brought up. The opportunity to improve Puerto Rico and an opportunity for the crypto community to enjoy a space that welcomes them. But it went halfway on both ends, right? It didn't go full length because the government didn't develop a strategy to incorporate this technology into the population. And at the same time, people coming in had a particular idea which was based on what the government told them, right? And I think that it's a good experience. Don't get me wrong. According to some report, these tax incentives have produced employment opportunities for many people in Puerto Rico. How much is debatable? I haven't seen the actual report, so I have my doubts as to the entirety of it. Because when you're dropping taxes to zero, right? There is a significant amount of tax revenue that the community doesn't get.
Yeah, that goes to schools and goes to infrastructure and absolutely.
There's a significant drain there, but aside from that, it's a good experiment. It's a good experiment how to integrate the community through the government. But I think that there's a lot of opportunity to also improve.
Yeah, I
Sorry
agree.
about that.
No, you're good.
I apologize.
No, you're good. Did anybody else have any other questions here?
No, I think it sounds like Puerto Rico has an infrastructure problem that needs to be fixed before you can roll out any kind of, before you can actually benefit from these technologies. And that's step one. And the government and the communities just kind of jump to step two.
That's true. But I think the planning, regardless of what you do, right? You can always fake it until you make it. But if the plan is wrong and you're doing something that's not really necessarily going to work, sometimes in the startup community, when you build something and it's not working, you pivot, right? You keep pivoting, and sometimes you do a full circle. There isn't a pivoting moment here. It's either we go all in or we don't. And that's an issue with how these tax policies are implemented for a particular purpose. And with the crypto plan, They just started, but I don't think they ever pivoted, or they never thought about how to integrate it. So, but yeah, you're correct. I mean, there's certainly, in order to scale it, it's going to need a little bit more infrastructure. But for the individual crypto bro, internet works. They can still trade, and but on a massive scale, on a scale that I think would benefit both the industry and the community in Puerto Rico, certainly need a much better infrastructure.
So okay, so this will be, I think, maybe the my final question. I kind of like to end it on something, looking forward and towards the future. But where do you see the future of Puerto Rico headed, or where do you hope that it goes? Maybe like, assume you have a magic wand and you can, what would be a big change that you would make, or something that you would like to see coming up here soon?
I think that COVID has forced everyone to rethink work, and it has implemented tools that 5 months ago would have been impossible to think of.
Yeah.
I'm a lawyer. I've been in the legal tech space for the last 3 or 4 years, and I've always heard how difficult and impossible it would be to do things through video conferencing. And now that's the only way things are moving.
What are we doing right now?
No, I mean, but in the industry where I come from, it doesn't work that way. I mean, this is an impossibility 6 months ago, because according every single lawyer or court system, this was just completely too far off. It was as if we were selling flying cars to them, right? So that's the type of mentality that needs to be embraced, right? This is the moment of innovation. This is the moment to just try stuff out. Maybe don't put all your eggs in one basket, but certainly open up different regulatory schemes with the intent to incorporate the community into projects that the community want to advance. So, for example, we need better energy sources. We have a bunch of coal that we burn, and we have a bunch of fossil fuel that we use for energy, but we do have a buttload of sun. We don't have enough cheap technology to produce the change necessary in our energy sources in order to make that significant jump in reliability and in pricing. So that's just one example, right? And again, it's not a top-down approach. It's how I can go in, listen to what your needs are, and show you that X, Y, and Z technology might be useful. Not that this is it, because technology is not going to solve everything. It's just that recognizing when and where certain technologies could advance a particular need. Because I don't believe that technology is going to change everything. Some technologies are very, very useful, but not all the problems are fixed with technology. Sometimes, instead of a video, I'd rather talk to someone on the phone. Or actually, I'd rather go see someone than talking on a video screen, regardless of the usage or the utility or the advances. So sometimes we just need to listen more attentively to what we need.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. It sounds like you're saying, a bit of a measured approach towards figuring out what works to address the problems that are front and center right now for the average Puerto Rican citizen. And that incorporates technology or whatever. Just be open to where this problem could be solved, and don't put all the eggs in one basket.
No white knights. We don't need more white knights. We just need people to hang out with and be part of a community.
Yeah.
And leave your armor in your car. Come hang out. And in the process,
save that for the government.
Yeah,
put the armor on when you deal with the government.
Yeah, we can talk things out, and maybe our conversations can lead to new ideas. So that's something that's needed, right? And that's not just us. I think everyone needs sometimes just to listen more.
Yeah, I definitely agree. That's that's a good life lesson. I think a lot of us could.
That's why I got the LLM in international human rights law, which is useless because it gives me no money, but I got a bunch of one-liners for you.
I gotta say, you're very quotable. You got some good. Yeah, you got the one-liners on deck for sure.
Anytime.
All right, man. Well, yeah, I think. What were you saying, Chill?
No, I was just saying thank you.
Yeah,
thanks for coming.
absolutely. We really appreciate you giving us your time here and sharing with us and giving us an update on there and just really putting a lot of this in context, because I know, all we hear is the crypto side of it, which is, rah, 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 all this great stuff. And then it's very beneficial and in my mind, critically necessary to get the real kind of boots on the ground update. And yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that with us, man.
No, I thank all of you for inviting me. Thank you, Chill. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Leon. It's a pleasure meeting you again.
Yeah.
I just wanted to encourage people actually to take advantage of this tax decree. I'm not trying to tell people not to show up. I'm just trying for them to be open to the possibility of learning while they're down here.
Well,
And if anyone's interested, I did send you guys some documentation from the government describing the laws. I don't work those particular decrees, but I can certainly hook anyone up with a bunch of lawyers that I know that do work this space. So feel free to follow me at Twitter, which is at Diego Alcala PR. And again, thank you very much for the opportunity. And if you guys ever need one-liners, just let me know and I'll come back.
No, we'll have you back for sure, man. This was a pleasure.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Yeah, well, good. I'm glad. It sounds like everybody had a good time, and I'm sure the streamers are happy with I finally got the stream up here. I didn't forget to make it go live, but yeah. So I think I'm gonna wrap it up and just plug the Opei, the Opei.com. We've got a course out on how to buy Bitcoin if you're interested in that. And then if you make a bunch of money, come back and watch this stream and hopefully take something away from it or wherever you decide to put those gains. And yeah, I think that's it for tonight. Chill, you good?
Yeah, I'm just hoping that next time we speak, we're gonna have some good positive updates, because we really would like to see an open economy where everybody can participate regardless of their social background. That's the goal. So let's create the open economy we all deserve.
Amen. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Good
See
night.
ya.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.